After 4 years together, my fiancé said, "You're not worthy of being my wife." I was 26 when the man I loved looked me straight in the eyes and told me I wasn't worthy of being his wife. We were sitting at our kitchen table, wedding magazines scattered between us, when Elliot said it. No anger in his voice, no hesitation, just this cold clinical assessment delivered like he was commenting on the weather. "You're not worthy of being my wife." I can do better. 4 years together. 3 of them good, or so I thought. 1 year engaged, and that's how it ended. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I laughed. It wasn't intentional. The sound just bubbled up from somewhere deep and unexpected. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the absurdity of hearing someone you love reduce you to nothing with a single sentence. But that laugh came out, and I watched his face shift from certainty to confusion to something that almost looked like fear. "You're right," I said, still smiling. "I do deserve better." I grabbed my keys and walked out. Didn't pack a bag, didn't make a scene, just left. Looking back now, I can see the signs I'd been ignoring for months. But in the beginning, Elliot and I were perfect. At least, that's what everyone said. We moved in together after 18 months. My parents weren't thrilled, but we were adults, and we had the same taste in everything. Same shows, same restaurants, same late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. He'd surprise me with coffee on my nightstand, send me videos during work that made me laugh. Normal couple things that made me believe I'd found my person. When he proposed at the lake on our 3rd anniversary, I cried happy tears, posted the ring photo, called my mom, started planning our summer wedding. Everything felt like it was falling into place. But about 6 months after the engagement, something shifted. It started small. Comments about my appearance that didn't quite land as compliments. "That dress would look better if you toned up a bit. Maybe try a different hairstyle, something more sophisticated." I'd laugh them off, tell myself he was just being honest. But the comments kept coming, expanding beyond how I looked into who I was. He started questioning things I said in front of his friends, making me feel stupid when I didn't know something he thought was obvious. He'd mention how I needed to be more ambitious, how my family was too simple, how I needed to elevate myself if I was going to be his wife. I wish I could say I immediately stood up for myself. Instead, I changed my hair, bought new clothes, started working longer hours, took online courses because he said I needed to be more cultured. Looking back, it's embarrassing how much I tried to mold myself into whatever version he wanted. But when you love someone, you don't always see how you're drowning until the water's already over your head. The breaking point came 3 months before our wedding. We were finalizing details when he made a comment about my dress, which he hadn't seen yet. His mother was worried I'd choose something expected rather than classy enough. When I asked what that meant, he unleashed everything he'd apparently been holding back. Went on this rant about how he'd been settling, how I wasn't wife material for someone like him, how his family had concerns about whether I could represent him properly in social circles. Then came those words, the ones I'll never forget. "You're not worthy of being my wife." I think I can find someone better. 4 years. And that's what he thought of me. That I wasn't worthy. Who says that to someone they supposedly love? That's when I laughed, when the absurdity of it all hit me at once. This man I'd been bending myself into shapes for was telling me I wasn't good enough, when the truth was he'd never deserved me in the first place. My laugh wasn't the reaction he expected. He looked angry, demanded to know what was so funny. I just shook my head and told him he was right. We shouldn't get married. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because I deserved someone who never made me feel like I had to earn love. I went straight to my best friend Monica's apartment. The tears came later that night. 4 years is a long time, and the grief hit hard. But underneath the sadness was this strange relief, like someone had finally lifted a weight I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Elliot called and texted constantly over the next few days. First angry, calling me dramatic, then apologetic, saying he was just stressed, finally condescending again, telling me I was making a huge mistake and would regret walking away from him. I didn't respond to any of it. Canceling the wedding was a nightmare. Thank God for wedding insurance. But my friends were incredible. They helped contact vendors, return gifts, break the news to guests. My parents were supportive, though I could tell my mom worried about what people would think. Small town gossip is brutal like that. The hardest part was going back to get my things. I timed it for when he'd be at work, but he showed up halfway through my packing, switched between begging me to reconsider and coldly telling me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Actually said, "Good luck finding someone else at your age," as if 26 was ancient. What struck me most was how he seemed more concerned about appearances than losing me. Kept saying things like, "Everyone's going to be talking about this," and "My family already told everyone about the wedding." Not once did he say he loved me or would miss me. That's when I knew for sure I was making the right choice. I found a small apartment across town and threw myself into making it my own space. First time I'd ever lived completely alone. And honestly, it was freeing. I could decorate however I wanted, watch whatever I liked without commentary, just exist without being constantly evaluated. The first month was rough. I'd wake up reaching for him, think of something I wanted to tell him before remembering we were done. But slowly, I started rediscovering parts of myself that had gotten lost, picked up hobbies I'd abandoned because he found them childish, reconnected with friends I drifted away from because he didn't click with them. About 6 weeks after the breakup, I heard through mutual friends that Elliot was telling people I'd had some kind of mental breakdown. Classic move, rewriting history to protect his ego. I considered setting the record straight but realized it didn't matter. The people who mattered knew the truth. What surprised me most was how many people reached out to check on me. Several confided that they'd noticed how Elliot spoke to me and had been concerned. One of his cousins even messaged to say she was proud of me for walking away. That validation helped on days when I second-guessed myself. Through all this, Elliot's texts became less frequent but more manipulative. Little breadcrumbs like, "Just saw your favorite movie is playing," or "Remember that restaurant we always wanted to try? Finally went there today. Never an apology." Just these weird attempts to remind me of what I was supposedly missing. I didn't respond to any of them. 3 months passed. I was doing better than I expected. My apartment felt like home. Work was going well. I'd even started going on casual coffee dates. Nothing serious, just reminding myself there were decent people out there. Then Monica invited me to her brother's birthday gathering. After some persuasion and maybe too much wine, I agreed to go. That's where I met Wyatt. He was Monica's brother's best friend from college, in town for the weekend. We ended up talking most of the night, first in a group, then somehow we'd migrated to the porch swing, having this deep conversation about everything from podcasts to our biggest fears. There was no pressure, no awkward posturing, just this easy connection I hadn't felt in maybe ever. I wasn't looking to jump into anything. I was actually enjoying my independence, still working through everything with a therapist I'd started seeing. But Wyatt and I exchanged numbers, and he texted the next day asking if I wanted to grab coffee before he headed home. He lived about 40 minutes away in the next town over. That coffee turned into lunch, which turned into a walk, which turned into dinner. We spent the entire day together, and it felt effortless. He asked thoughtful questions and actually listened, talked about his family with genuine warmth. Not once did he comment on my appearance or my potential. He seemed interested in who I actually was, not who I could become. We started dating long distance, if you can call 40 minutes long distance. He'd come to my town some weekends. I'd go to his on others. We had our share of awkward early moments, but they became things we laughed about instead of sources of tension. About 3 months into dating Wyatt, I ran into Elliot and his new girlfriend Daisy at Target. I'd been dreading this moment, but when I saw them, the weirdest thing happened. I felt nothing. No jealousy, no anger, not even awkwardness. Just this calm recognition that that chapter was closed. We exchanged brief hellos. The whole interaction lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like a personal victory. Later that week, Elliot texted me for the first time in months. Good to see you. You look well. Would love to catch up sometime as friends. I showed it to Wyatt, who just raised his eyebrows and said, What do you want to do about it? Not telling me how to respond, not getting jealous, just supporting whatever I decided. I chose not to respond. Some doors are better left closed. Things with Wyatt progressed naturally. After 6 months of dating, he suggested I move in since I was spending most weekends at his place anyway. His house was older but full of character. He'd been renovating it himself, room by room. The idea of leaving my little sanctuary was scary, but it also felt right. Moving in together was an adjustment. We had to figure out where my stuff would go, navigate different preferences about temperature and cleanliness. He leaves shoes in the middle of the hallway. I leave cabinets open. But instead of these differences causing friction like they did with Elliot, they just seemed to balance us out. Through Monica, still my excellent source of small-town intelligence, I heard that Elliot and Daisy were getting serious. He'd taken her to meet his parents, something he didn't do with me until almost 2 years in. I was surprised by how little it bothered me. If anything, I felt a little sorry for Daisy, wondering if she was experiencing the same subtle erosion of self-esteem I had. About a month after I moved in with Wyatt, Elliot's texts started again. Nothing inappropriate exactly, just persistent. How have you been? Heard you moved? Hope all is well. Remember that band we saw? They're coming back to town. I kept my replies brief and neutral when I responded at all. Then Elliot called instead of texting. I was cooking dinner with Wyatt when my phone rang. Showed him the screen, feeling suddenly anxious. You can answer if you want, he said, giving me space to make my own decision. I declined the call. Elliot left a voicemail asking if we could meet up because he had things he wanted to say in person. After discussing it with Wyatt, I texted back saying I was happy in my current relationship and didn't think meeting up was a good idea. His response came quickly. I understand. I just wanted to apologize properly for how things ended. I said things I didn't mean. Too little, too late. But at least it was something. I thanked him for the apology and left it at that. Life went on. Wyatt and I settled into a rhythm that never felt routine. We explored restaurants, took weekend trips, had game nights with friends, talked about the future casually, nothing pressured, just possibilities. Then, 6 months after I moved in, Wyatt proposed. We were having a picnic at a different lake, not the same one where Elliot had proposed. He simply said he couldn't imagine his life without me. The ring was perfect, a vintage sapphire that had belonged to his grandmother. I cried, laughed, and said yes without a moment's hesitation. That evening, as we celebrated with champagne on our porch, my phone lit up with a text from Elliot. Heard about your engagement. Didn't realize things were that serious. Hope you're not rushing into anything you'll regret. I showed Wyatt, who just shook his head. Some people never change, do they? We decided the best response was no response. I blocked Elliot's number that night. Whatever game he was playing, I was done being part of it. We shared the news on social media the next day, and the outpouring of love was overwhelming. Among the comments was one from Monica that made me laugh. From not worthy to worthy of the best man I know in less than a year. That's what I call an upgrade. We set our wedding date for 6 months out. Nothing extravagant. Just a small ceremony with the people who mattered most. And here's the cherry on top. Through the grapevine, I heard that Daisy had broken up with Elliot. Apparently, she'd reconnected with an old flame and realized she'd been settling. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our wedding day was perfect in all the imperfect ways that make something real. It rained in the morning, supposedly good luck. My veil caught on a rose bush during photos. Wyatt's nephew announced he had to pee right in the middle of our vows, but none of it mattered. We were surrounded by people who loved us for who we actually were. My maid of honor, Monica, had my phone during the ceremony. She told me later that Elliot had called 3 times. We both laughed at the absurdity. Imagine thinking your ex would answer on her wedding day. We honeymooned at a little beachside town, spending our days exploring and just enjoying being together without wedding stress. When we got home, I had 17 missed calls from Elliot, plus a string of messages that progressed from "I need to talk to you" to "please don't ignore me" to finally, "I made a huge mistake letting you go." I showed Wyatt, who looked concerned rather than jealous. "Do you want me to talk to him?" he offered. Maybe he'd finally get the message. I hesitated, then nodded. The opportunity came sooner than expected. We were unpacking from our honeymoon when my phone rang. Elliot again. Without missing a beat, Wyatt picked it up and answered cheerfully. "Hello, Ruby's phone." There was a long pause. Then Elliot asked if I was available. Wyatt, cool as could be, said, "She's a bit busy unpacking from our honeymoon right now." "This is her husband, Wyatt. Is there something I can help you with?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Elliot stammered something about just wanting to congratulate us. Wyatt thanked him politely, told him we appreciated the thought, but that I had moved on completely and would prefer not to keep in contact. He wasn't rude or aggressive, just calm, direct, and firm. After he hung up, I just stared at him in amazement. No drama, no jealousy, no insecurity, just setting a healthy boundary. That's what a real partner does. Elliot sent one last message. "I understand now. I'm sorry for everything. You deserve to be happy." It felt like the final page of a chapter I'd been trying to close for a long time. A year passed. Wyatt and I talked about buying a house, and after months of searching, we found a 3-bedroom ranch that needed some work, but had a big backyard for the dog we were planning to adopt. We spent weeks settling in, dealing with a flooded dishwasher, a family of squirrels in the attic, and a bathroom sink that gurgled at random hours. But working through those little disasters together felt strangely fun. We made a good team. We decided to host a housewarming party, just a casual Saturday afternoon with about 20 friends and family. I spent days cleaning, arranging food, making sure everything looked perfect despite the half-finished painting project in the hallway. The party was going great until Monica came into the kitchen with a weird look on her face. Elliot was outside. Yes, that Elliot. Completely uninvited, carrying a bottle of wine, looking slightly disheveled. My first reaction was annoyance, but then I realized something. I wasn't nervous. That knot in my stomach that used to appear whenever I thought about seeing him was completely gone. I told Monica to let him in. Seemed easier than creating drama. I found Wyatt and explained the situation. He just raised his eyebrows and asked what I wanted to do. Again, no jealousy, no territorial nonsense, just support. We decided to greet Elliot together. He was standing awkwardly by the snack table when we walked outside. He handed me the wine, ironically, the exact kind he used to criticize me for buying because it wasn't sophisticated enough. The conversation started painfully polite. He complimented the house, asked about the neighborhood, mentioned the weather. I could feel the tension building beneath the surface. Things took a turn when one of Wyatt's cousins innocently mentioned how happy we seemed. Elliot mumbled something under his breath that sounded like, "She wouldn't be here without me." When I asked him to repeat himself, he launched into this bizarre speech about how he'd prepared me for Wyatt, how his criticisms had motivated me to improve myself, how I should actually be grateful for our breakup because it led me here. I was too stunned to respond, but Wyatt calmly stepped in. No raised voice, no confrontation. He simply said that while he was grateful I was in his life, my personal growth had nothing to do with being torn down by someone else. He added that we'd prefer to focus on celebrating our new home, and maybe this wasn't the best time for this conversation. Elliot didn't take the hint. Instead, he turned to me and asked if I ever thought about what could have been if he hadn't let me go. His words, as if he didn't tell me I wasn't worthy. I told him as gently but firmly as I could that I never think about what could have been because I'm too busy being grateful for what is. That breaking up was the best thing that could have happened to both of us. That worthy isn't something someone else gets to decide for you. It's something you realize about yourself. The look on his face was complicated. Surprise, confusion, maybe even regret. But then he looked around at our friends, our home, our life, and something shifted. He muttered that I'd changed, like that was a bad thing. Said I didn't used to be this cold. Before I could respond, Monica stepped in with perfect timing. Mentioned she'd run into Daisy and her new husband Barry last weekend. Apparently they're expecting their first baby and just bought a house across town. She showed us a picture. They looked genuinely happy. Watching Elliot's face as he processed this information was like watching someone solve a difficult equation. He seemed genuinely shocked that Daisy had moved on so completely. When Monica casually mentioned that Daisy had called the relationship with him a learning experience, I thought he might actually explode. Instead, he drained his drink, mumbled something about having another commitment, and headed for the door. Wyatt walked him out while Monica and I stayed behind, trying not to make eye contact until he was gone to avoid bursting into laughter. When Wyatt came back, he just shook his head, said Elliot had asked him man to man if I was always this stubborn. Wyatt told him he preferred the term self-assured and suggested Elliot take an Uber home since he'd clearly been drinking. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Elliot. I'm sorry for yesterday. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I hope you're happy. Simple, ambiguous, probably the closest thing to closure I'd ever get from him. I didn't respond. Some conversations are better left ended. Looking back on everything that's happened, it's strange to think how devastated I was when Elliot told me I wasn't worthy. At the time, it felt like my world was ending. Now I realize it was actually beginning. Our roof needs replacing sooner than we thought. We still argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash. I sometimes struggle with echoes of the insecurity he planted. But through it all, I've learned that worthiness isn't something you earn by changing yourself to please someone else. It's something you recognize when you're finally with people who never questioned it in the first place. Being told you're not worthy is sometimes the best reminder that you, and only you, get to decide your own value. Worthiness isn't earned. It's remembered. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.